The reparatory justice movement that CARICOM has decided to pursue is to repair the harm of over 300 years of brutal oppression, and to recognize that when you do something for 300 years, you institutionalize it, you entrench it.
For centuries, the Caribbean has been exploited to fuel the wealth of European empires, leaving the Caribbean people to suffer under the chains of slavery and systemic oppression. Now, the descendants of those enslaved are standing up at the UN, demanding justice, not apologies, but real reparations. In this video, we dive deep into CARICOM's case for reparations, their bold 10-point plan, their case for justice, and the challenges they face in holding former colonial powers accountable. From the dark legacy of slavery to today's political battles, we'll break down the historical context, CARICOM's demands, and what's at stake for the Caribbean's future. Let's start with some historical context. It started with the arrival of Columbus in Jamaica in 1494, when the Spanish enslaved the local Taino people and nearly exterminated them. After finding no gold on the island, they took off, but not before establishing plantations to provide food for nearby Spanish ships. When the British took over in the 17th century, Jamaica used enslaved African labor to become a major sugar-producing colony. Disgusting sanitary conditions, routine torture, and family separations failed to paint the full extent of British brutality. Conditions were so bad that the life expectancy of a West African slave in Jamaica was 7 years. The legacy of British rule can still be seen in Jamaica, where the official language is English and the national sport is cricket, as in England, and the jurisprudence and legislative frameworks are also of British ilk. 4 years after Jamaica, Columbus also made a stop at Trinidad and Tobago in 1498, and with that began the centuries of European colonial projects by the Spanish, French, Hollanders, and the British. And what did they all need? African slaves. Caught between the ambitions of foreign empires, farmhands at the plantations struggled to get by. Haiti, similarly, has a bone to pick with the former empires that profited from enslaving, degrading, and humiliating its people. Haiti constitutes the western part of Hispaniola, opposite the Dominican Republic, and at one point, it was the wealthiest colony in the French Empire. 800,000 slaves were producing 40% of Europe's sugar and 60% of its coffee. And the Haitians paid a nasty price for it. The French Code Noir allowed the enslavers to whip, brand, and mutilate slaves, as well as separate children from parents. In the 18th century, conditions were so inhumane that France had to import large amounts of Africans just to keep the population from declining. After a successful slave rebellion, the Haitians briefly occupied the Dominican Republic, which, combined with the rampant racism of the Spanish rule in that country, led to discrimination against dark-skinned people. And that racial divide continues to this day, as the Dominican Republic cracks down on Haitian immigrants while utilizing them for cheap labor. At the International Day of Remembrance of the Victims of Slavery last year, the UN chief Antonio Gutierrez said that the horrific past, quote, laid the foundations for a violent discrimination system based on white supremacy.
Many of those who organized and ran the transatlantic slave trade amassed huge fortunes. Meanwhile, the enslaved were deprived of education, healthcare, opportunity, and prosperity. These laid the foundations for a violent discrimination system based on white supremacy that still echoes today.
By the way, if you're finding this video insightful, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more such videos. Thank you. At a recent UN forum, Hillary Brown spoke on behalf of CARICOM when she called for a, quote, clear diplomatic and advocacy strategy to advance the agenda through joint action in the United Nations, the Commonwealth, and the intergovernmental bodies. This move comes on the heels of CARICOM's collaboration with the African Union, whose 2025 theme was, quote, "Justice for Africans and the People of African Descent through Reparations." Reparations have been a hot topic over the last few months. An African Union summit in February began shaping up a unified vision of what reparations might look like. African and Caribbean nations came together in April to establish a tribunal, an ad hoc court, much like the Nuremberg trials of Nazi war criminals after the Second World War. So, the question is, what are CARICOM's demands and how do they want to move forward with them? The CARICOM Reparations Commission has established a 10-point reparations plan. According to this plan, the descendants of indigenous people subjected to genocide, forced migration, and colonial injustices deserve a formal apology. In February, Grenadian Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell asked for, quote, "appropriate apology and compensation from European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen."
We owe it to ourselves and to future generations of humanity to ensure that the transatlantic slave trade and the enslavement of Africans in the Caribbean, Latin, Central, South, and North America is accepted as a crime against humanity, and that the appropriate apology and compensation is paid, and that the international community accepts that this should never happen again.
The next key demand is for the Indigenous Peoples Development Programs, which call for the restoration of land, resources, languages, and cultural heritage that were lost due to European colonization. Indigenous groups in the Caribbean remain marginalized, and European states need to take responsibility and help rebuild these communities. Another important aspect is funding for reparation to Africa, which addresses the forced displacement of nearly 12 million Africans during the transatlantic slave trade. CARICOM is calling for resettlement programs to help the descendants of these enslaved Africans return to their ancestral homelands if they choose to do so. The establishment of cultural institutions and the return of cultural heritage are also critical. European colonial powers deliberately destroyed local customs, languages, and practices, and according to the 10-point plan, it is their responsibility to restore historical memory. This includes the creation of museums, research centers, and other institutions to preserve and celebrate Caribbean culture, a process that was disrupted during the colonial period. There is also an urgent need for assistance in remedying the public health crisis. Caribbean populations of African descent have the highest global rates of hypertension, type 2 diabetes, and other chronic diseases. New research links these health issues to brutal conditions and nutritional deficiencies caused by centuries of exploitation, so reparations must include addressing this public health crisis. Education programs are another cornerstone of CARICOM's demands. Colonization left generations in the Caribbean illiterate and undereducated, and European powers must now take responsibility for providing quality education to marginalized communities across the region. CARICOM also calls for enhancing historical and cultural knowledge exchanges. Given the Caribbean's diverse ethnic makeup, European states should invest in programs that promote cross-cultural understanding between African, Caribbean, and Asian cultures, helping to heal the deep cultural rifts caused by centuries of colonialism. Psychological rehabilitation is another critical area addressing the intergenerational trauma passed down through the Caribbean's colonial history. Former colonial powers must fund mental health programs to help heal the psychological scars left by centuries of abuse. CARICOM also asks for the right to development using technology. Let's not forget how European empires deprived the Caribbean of the opportunity to develop human resources and technological expertise. CARICOM demands that European states invest in scientific and technological programs to help the Caribbean advance and develop. Finally, CARICOM demands debt cancellation and monetary compensation. After gaining independence, Caribbean nations were left with overwhelming debt burdens. To help these nations thrive, CARICOM is calling for the cancellation of international debt, the provision of monetary compensation, and support for domestic debt relief. While the plan makes a lot of sense for the Caribbean countries who suffered at the hands of the colonizers, We can't deny the fact that the US and Europe couldn't be more uninterested in this discussion. Members of the Portuguese Parliament wanted to charge their president with treason when he expressed the need to right past wrongs. Last year, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said he would rather, quote, look forward than have, quote, very long, endless discussions about reparations on the past. And in the funniest twist of it all, Donald Trump wants to offer reparations instead to, quote, white Americans affected by illegal immigration. The ICJ cannot adjudicate claims without the consent of both parties, which makes matters worse. A significant legal challenge is in the intertemporal principle, which states that countries are only accountable for violations of international law if those actions were illegal at the time. Since slavery was both legal and institutionalized, building a legal case for reparations becomes complex. The fight for reparations is not just about the past, but about building a future of justice and healing. CARICOM's bold 10-point plan calls for accountability and restoration, and while the challenges are great, the resilience of the Caribbean people gives hope. With determination and solidarity, the path forward promises a more just world, where the scars of the past are acknowledged and true healing can begin. Now, we want to hear from you. Do you believe European powers should be held accountable for their colonial actions? If so, how do you think reparations should be implemented? Let us know in the comments below and keep the conversation going. Also, check out our video about the benefits of investing in the Caribbean. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more videos like this. Be sure to turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. Your support helps us keep bringing important stories to light. This is Caribbean Focus, and we'll see you in the next video.